The grocery store was buzzing with its usual mid-afternoon chaos. Shoppers hurried through the aisles, carts clattering, children whining, and the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. The checkout lines were long, and patience was wearing thin. In one of the lines, a man stood quietly, his basket filled with essentials, bread, milk, and a few snacks for his daughter. He was tall, with a calm presence, but his eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen more than his share of life's struggles. A woman in her late 50s, her face pinched with irritation, stood behind him. She had been muttering under her breath for a while, but her voice suddenly rose, sharp and cutting. "Excuse me. Do you think you're special or something? You just cut in front of me like you own the place." The man turned, his expression calm but puzzled. "Ma'am, I didn't cut in line. I've been standing here for a while." Her face flushed red, and her voice grew louder, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. "Oh, sure, play the innocent card. People like you always think you can get away with anything." The air in the store seemed to freeze. Shoppers stopped what they were doing, their eyes darting between the woman and the man. The cashier, a young woman with wide eyes, hesitated, unsure of what to do. The man took a deep breath, his hands tightening slightly on the handle of his basket. He could feel the weight of the stares, the unspoken judgments. But instead of reacting with anger, he straightened his shoulders and looked the woman directly in the eyes. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady but firm, "I don't know what's going on in your life today, but I hope it gets better. Whatever pain you're carrying, I hope you find peace with it. But please, don't take it out on me. I'm just trying to get through the day, same as you." The store fell silent. The woman's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her face, once flushed with anger, now paled as his words sank in. The onlookers exchanged glances, some nodding in quiet approval, others simply stunned. Without another word, the man turned back to the cashier, paid for his items, and walked out of the store, his head held high. The woman stood frozen, her earlier bravado replaced by something far more uncomfortable, shame. As the man stepped outside into the sunlight, he took a deep breath, feeling the tension slowly leave his body. He didn't know it yet, but that moment in the grocery store was about to change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The man walked to his car, a modest sedan with a few dents and scratches that told stories of their own. He placed the groceries in the back seat, careful not to crush the loaf of bread. As he slid into the driver's seat, he paused for a moment, his hands resting on the steering wheel. The encounter in the store had stirred something in him, a mix of frustration, sadness, and a strange sense of pride. He had handled it better than he would have years ago, but it still hurt. He started the car and drove through the familiar streets of his neighborhood, a quiet area where everyone knew each other by sight if not by name. His mind wandered back to his childhood, growing up in a small town where he was often the only black kid in his class. He remembered the whispers, the sideways glances, the times he was made to feel like he didn't belong. His parents had taught him to hold his head high, to work hard, and to never let anyone's ignorance define him. But it wasn't always easy. As a young man, he had dreams of becoming a teacher. He loved working with kids and wanted to make a difference in their lives. But life had other plans. When his daughter was born, her mother left, unable to handle the responsibilities of parenthood. Overnight, he became a single father, juggling work, childcare, and his own dreams. He took on odd jobs, delivery driver, warehouse worker, anything that paid the bills. His dream of teaching was put on hold, but he never gave up on it entirely. Now in his early 40s, he worked as a janitor at a local school. It wasn't glamorous, but it allowed him to be close to his daughter, who was in the 5th grade there. He took pride in his work, making sure the classrooms were spotless and the hallways gleaming. The kids knew him by name, and he always had a kind word or a joke for them. To them, he wasn't just the janitor, he was a friend. But life outside the school was harder. He faced subtle and not-so-subtle racism almost daily. People crossed the street when they saw him walking toward them. Store clerks followed him around, assuming he might steal something. And then there were the moments like today, when someone's anger and prejudice boiled over in public. He pulled into the driveway of his small house, a modest place, but filled with love. His daughter was waiting for him at the door, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Daddy! You're home." He smiled, pushing aside the weight of the day. "Hey, sweetheart. Did you finish your homework?" She nodded eagerly. "All done. Can we make cookies later?" "Of course," he said, ruffling her hair. "But first, let's put these groceries away." As they unpacked the bags together, he couldn't help but think about the woman in the store. He wondered what had made her so angry, what pain she was carrying. He didn't know her story, but he knew one thing for sure: everyone had one. And sometimes, all it took was a little kindness to change the course of someone's day, or even their life. The woman stood frozen in the grocery store long after the man had left. His words echoed in her mind, each one hitting her like a hammer. "I don't know what's going on in your life today, but I hope it gets better. Whatever pain you're carrying, I hope you find peace with it." She felt a lump rise in her throat, and her hands trembled as she fumbled with her purse. The cashier quietly rang up her items, avoiding eye contact. The other shoppers had gone back to their own business, but she could still feel their lingering stares, their silent judgment. She paid quickly and hurried out of the store, her heart pounding. The sunlight outside felt harsh, almost accusatory. She walked to her car, her mind racing. What had she done? Why had she lashed out like that? The truth was, her life had been falling apart for months. At 58, she had recently gone through a bitter divorce after 30 years of marriage. Her husband had left her for a younger woman, and the betrayal had shattered her. She felt invisible, discarded, as if her entire life had been a waste. Financially, things weren't much better. Her ex-husband had taken most of their savings, leaving her to scrape by on a part-time job at a local library. She had moved into a small apartment, a far cry from the comfortable home she had once shared. Loneliness had become her constant companion, and bitterness had started to creep into her heart. That morning, she had received a letter from her son, who lived across the country. He had written to say he wouldn't be able to visit for the holidays. It wasn't his fault, he had work commitments, but the news had felt like another blow. She had gone to the grocery store to distract herself, but the long lines and crowded aisles had only added to her frustration. And then she had seen the man in front of her. In her mind, he had cut in line, though deep down, she knew he hadn't. But in that moment, her anger had needed a target, and he had been there. She had lashed out, saying things she now regretted. As she drove home, tears streamed down her face. She replayed the scene in her mind, cringing at her own behavior. She had always prided herself on being a kind person, someone who helped others and treated people with respect. But today, she had been the opposite of that. When she got home, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall. The man's words kept coming back to her. "Whatever pain you're carrying, I hope you find peace with it." For the first time in months, she allowed herself to cry, not just for the man she had hurt, but for herself. She cried for the life she had lost, for the person she had become, and for the pain she had been carrying alone. That night, she made a decision. She didn't know how, but she was going to make things right. She didn't know the man's name or where he lived, but she was determined to find him. She owed him an apology, not just for what she had said, but for the pain she had caused. The grocery store incident might have faded into memory if not for the teenager standing near the self-checkout. She had been filming a TikTok video about her boring grocery haul when the argument erupted. At first, she had kept her phone pointed at her cart, but as the woman's voice grew louder and the tension thickened, she couldn't resist turning her camera toward the scene. She captured it all: the woman's harsh words, the man's calm but powerful response, and the stunned silence that followed. Without thinking twice, she uploaded the clip to her social media accounts with the caption, "This man's response to racism is everything." Flushed face, clapping hands, #respect, #viral moments. Within hours, the video began to spread. It was shared on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, racking up thousands of views, then hundreds of thousands. People were captivated by the man's dignity and the raw emotion of the moment. Comments flooded in, praising him for his grace under pressure and condemning the woman for her behavior. This man is a class act. We could all learn something from him. Why do people think it's okay to treat others like this? Disgusting. That woman needs to take a long look in the mirror. But not all the comments were kind. Some people took the opportunity to attack the woman, calling her names and making assumptions about her character. Others debated whether the video should have been posted at all, arguing that it invaded the privacy of everyone involved. Meanwhile, the man had no idea any of this was happening. He didn't use social media much, aside from occasionally checking his daughter's school updates. It wasn't until his co-worker at the school approached him the next morning that he found out. "Hey, man, have you seen this?" his co-worker asked, holding up his phone. The man frowned as he watched the video play. His stomach churned as he saw himself on the screen, heard the woman's voice, and relived the moment all over again. "Who posted this?" he asked, his voice tight. "Some kid, I think. It's everywhere now. You're kind of a hero, dude." The man shook his head. "I'm not a hero. I didn't want to make things worse." But the world had already decided otherwise. By the end of the day, news outlets had picked up the story. Headlines like "Man's Powerful Response to Racism Goes Viral" and "Grocery Store Incident Sparks National Conversation" dominated social media feeds. Reporters began reaching out, asking for interviews, but the man declined. He didn't want the attention. He just wanted to live his life. The woman, on the other hand, was drowning in the fallout. Her face was everywhere, and the backlash was relentless. Strangers sent her angry messages, and her phone rang constantly with calls from unknown numbers. She felt exposed, humiliated, and utterly alone. But amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. A few people began to speak up in her defense. "We don't know her story. Maybe she was having a bad day. She messed up, but doesn't she deserve a chance to apologize? This is why we need more kindness, not more hate." The video had started a conversation, not just about racism, but about forgiveness, understanding, and the power of second chances. The man's life changed overnight, though not in the way he had ever imagined. The video of the grocery store incident continued to spread, and with it came a wave of attention he wasn't prepared for. Strangers recognized him on the street, nodding at him with respect or stopping to shake his hand. "You're that guy from the video, aren't you?" they'd say. "What you did was amazing." At first, he tried to brush it off. He wasn't comfortable with the praise. To him, he hadn't done anything extraordinary, he had simply chosen not to react with anger. But the world seemed to see it differently. The school where he worked became a hub of activity. Parents and teachers approached him to thank him for setting an example of dignity and grace. Even the principal called him into her office to commend him. "You've made us all proud," she said. "You're a role model, whether you intended to be or not." But not everyone's reactions were positive. Some of his co-workers began to treat him differently, either avoiding him or acting overly formal around him. He could feel the distance growing, and it made him uneasy. He didn't want to be put on a pedestal, he just wanted to do his job and take care of his daughter. At home, things were different. His daughter, always perceptive, noticed the change in him. "Daddy, why do people keep talking about you?" she asked one evening as they sat at the kitchen table, working on her homework. He sighed, setting down his pen. "There was a video, sweetheart. Someone filmed me at the store, and now a lot of people have seen it." "Are you famous now?" she asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. He chuckled softly. "Not famous, just noticed. But it's not something I asked for." She tilted her head, thinking. "Is it a bad thing?" "Not bad, just complicated," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes when people notice you, they forget you're just a person, like everyone else. The attention also brought unexpected opportunities. A local nonprofit organization reached out, asking if he would speak at an event about racial equality and kindness. At first, he hesitated. Public speaking wasn't something he had ever considered, and the thought of standing in front of a crowd made him nervous. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized it could be a chance to make a difference. Maybe this is my way of turning something negative into something positive, he told his daughter one night. If I can help even one person see things differently, it might be worth it. She smiled. You'll do great, Daddy. You always do. Despite his growing resolve, the pressure weighed on him. He felt like he was living under a microscope, every word and action scrutinized. He worried about making a mistake, about saying the wrong thing and disappointing the people who looked up to him. But through it all, he held on to one thought: this wasn't about him. It was about the message. It was about showing people that kindness and understanding could overcome even the deepest divides. The story of the grocery store incident had come full circle. What began as a moment of conflict had transformed into something far greater, a lesson in humanity, forgiveness, and the power of second chances. The man stood on a small stage at a community event, looking out at the crowd. It had been months since the video went viral, and life had settled into a new rhythm. He had become an advocate for kindness, using his platform to share his story and inspire others. But tonight wasn't about him. It was about the journey they had all taken together. I want to thank everyone for being here, he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. This isn't just my story. It's ours. It's a reminder that we all have struggles, and we all make mistakes. But it's also a reminder that we have the power to change, to grow, to forgive, and to be better. In the audience, the woman sat quietly, her hands clasped in her lap. She had come a long way since that day in the grocery store. Her apology to the man had been the first step, but it was only the beginning. She had spent the past months volunteering at a community center, helping others who were struggling with loneliness and hardship. It wasn't easy, but it gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. As the man spoke, she felt a swell of gratitude. He had shown her kindness when she least deserved it, and that act of grace had changed her life. She wasn't the same person she had been that day in the store, and she never wanted to be that person again. When the event ended, the man stepped off the stage and made his way through the crowd. People shook his hand and thanked him, but his eyes were searching for one person. Finally, he saw her, the woman who had once hurled insults at him in a moment of anger. She approached him hesitantly, her eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." He smiled, extending his hand. "Thank you for being here. It means a lot." They stood there for a moment, two people whose lives had been forever changed by a single moment. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. And in that reality, they had found something precious: hope. As the man drove home that night, he thought about the journey they had all been on. It wasn't just about him or the woman or the people who had watched the video. It was about all of us. It was about the choices we make, the way we treat each other, and the power we have to create change. When he walked through the door, his daughter ran to greet him, her face glowing with pride. "How was it, Daddy?" she asked. He picked her up and hugged her tightly. "It was good, sweetheart. Really good." And as he held her, he realized that the lesson of the story was simple but profound: no matter how divided we may seem, we are all connected. And in that connection, there is always the possibility for kindness, for understanding, and for a better tomorrow.